I'm Mike Marza with a recap of day 5 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. The first week of testimony is now over, and the Combs defense team wrapped up their cross-examination of the prosecution's star witness, Cassie Ventura. This after trying to paint her participation in these so-called freak-offs as consensual. But prosecutors say Cassie's testimony is just part of this case. More witnesses, of course, set to take the stand in the coming weeks. We'll talk with legal contributor Bernarda Vilonia in just a moment. But first up, Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles with more on what happened today in court.
Cassie Ventura, the centerpiece of the federal sex trafficking and racketeering trial against Sean Diddy Combs, wrapping up 4 days of sometimes graphic and explicit testimony Friday afternoon. The legal team for Combs continuing to try to discredit Ventura with more readbacks of emails and text messages when she was the one suggesting more freak-offs in their on-again, off-again 11-year relationship. One text message thread begins with Combs writing, "I want to freak off one last time tonight." Ventura responding, "What? You can't read?" he responds. Ventura saying, "I don't want to freak off one last time. I want to freak off for the first time for the rest of our lives." But with thousands of messages and evidence, the cross-examination by defense attorney Anna Esteva disjointed at times. At one point she says, "You can take this exhibit down. I apologize." Another time asking Ventura, "Were you?" but then catching herself saying, "Withdrawn." And another time saying, "Can you pull up Defense Exhibit 1022, please?" "Oh, withdrawn, withdrawn." Combs seemingly becoming anxious, passing Post-it notes across the defense table to Esteva. Ultimately, the 55-year-old hugging Esteva after finishing up the cross-examination. On redirect by federal prosecutors, Ventura bursting into tears for the very first time during her calm, soft-spoken testimony, telling the court the freak-offs were also violent. Prosecutors asking, "How did you feel during freak-offs when Sean beat you?" Ventura responding, "Worthless, just like dirt, that I didn't matter to him, like I was nothing."
To be able to come into this courtroom and testify for the last week on these very graphic subjects is a true testament to her character.
The next witness after Ventura, a federal agent testifying about what they recovered from Combs' hotel room after his September 2024 arrest in New York City. $9,000 in cash, illegal drugs, baby oil, lubricant, and mood lighting. Now, the very last witness to testify today is Dawn Richards. She is a member of Danity Kane. That is a musical group founded by Combs. She testified today that she saw Combs beat Ventura in a Los Angeles hotel room in 2009.
Our thanks to Darla Miles for that recap. We're now joined by ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Vilonia. Appreciate you being here. So much to get through.
Yes.
You're into the first week, and it seems like so much has already happened. What was your biggest takeaway from today?
Another emotional day, but if I have to sum it up in one line or one answer, it would have to be the answer that was objected to and it was sustained. And that was when Cassie was asked, "What was your other job?" And Cassie said, "I was a sex worker." Because that's really what this entire case, according to the prosecution, is all about. So while that objection was sustained, and the jury's not supposed to use that, you can't unring the bell. So the jury has now heard exactly how she felt and who she was during those 11 years of a relationship. So throughout the day, the cross-examination still, we know we had issues with the presentation of the cross-examination, trying to get answers, and that's due to the defense attorney, not due to Cassie, because she was very open forward in terms of answering all the questions. But today, very emotional. Cassie cried from time to time. The defense was able to get a few things out in terms of showing that there was a loving Sean Combs, that there was a caring Sean Combs, that there was a Sean Combs that wanted to protect her in terms of that sex tape that they believe may have gotten out. But still, the prosecution was able to come back and bring it back to, like, look, a relationship can be loving from time to time. but this is 11 years of where she was being manipulated, how the power that Sean Combs had just overcame her will, so she wasn't a willing participant.
There was also a moment, too, where jurors were able to hear Cassie Ventura
Yes.
not soft-spoken,
Yes.
not quiet,
Yes.
not reserved. What happened there?
So that was the moment that there was testimony about the possibility that there was a video of one of these freak-offs that might have been leaked or that someone was in possession of. So Cassie was very emotional in the sense of that she was upset that, oh my God, this can get out, this can get out. So she did get in contact with Sean Combs, but at the direction of Sean Combs, she felt like she had to take care of it. But that was the first time you heard a different side of Cassie.
They played an audio recording,
yes,
right? Yeah,
they played an audio recording. So Cassie, during this entire week, was soft-spoken, very reserved, very calm, cool, collected. But they heard a different side of Cassie where she said, I'll kill you. I want the tape. I'm summarizing this. So that was a different side. So I think for the jury, that kind of like highlighted wait, what's going on? This is not the person that we've been watching for the last 4 days.
Yeah, it was 4 days, some 20 hours. And at one point today, Cassie Ventura was talked about that much covered and much talked about now in this trial. The $20 million she got in the civil settlement a couple of years ago with Sean Combs. And she said something striking, and she broke down when she said it. What did she say?
She said that because they were trying to cross her in the sense of saying that, oh, you got $20 million out of this, and that's the driving force for you coming forward. She said she would be willing to give it all back to get her autonomy back, to turn back the hands of time for her to have not gone through these 11 years of being brutally beaten and treated as a sex worker.
How did the jury take that?
I think that was a strong note to end with, but by the prosecutor, because in the end, when you look at Cassie testifying on the stand and you're in that room, you can see a woman that is broken, a woman that has undergone so much trauma and how much work it took to get her even to the stand, to be the woman, to be able to sit down and face the person that caused her so much pain. So I think that was definitely an emotional moment.
And by the way, she's 8.5 months pregnant.
Yes.
There was a rush to get her testimony in. What was, some have described it as sort of gamesmanship by the attorneys, the defense attorneys accused of trying to stretch out her testimony. What was going on there?
So you have to think that for the defense had thousands and thousands of pages having to deal with text messages. And yes, the prosecution took a day and a half to do their direct examination. And the judge said, well, you'll have a day and a half to do your cross-examination. That's only fair. But I think it's not fair in the sense because the prosecution had all this discovery, all this material way before the defense had this material. But I think with the defense, again, the attorney that did the cross-examination, I just don't think she was up for the task of cross-examining such a star witness with so much material and confronting her with that material. But in terms of gamemanship, what would have happened if Cassie would have had to stop trial and not be able to conclude her cross-examination? It could have been a mistrial. Could have to start this all over again.
So high stakes, that's why the judge said
yes.
her testimony had to be done
It
today.
had to be concluded because if not, you forcing a mistrial to take place.
Just a couple of more, but we did hear from 2 more witnesses today.
Yes.
And that included, we heard Darla mention it, Dawn Richard, who was a member of Danity Kane. Sean Combs put together this band.
Making the Band. I grew up on Making the Band.
Well, I watched the show
right,
as well.
I watched it as well.
It was a reality show, and it talked about the process, and it showed the process of literally making this band. But we heard a dark side of
yes.
what was happening. Dawn testified that she witnessed Sean Combs assault Cassie Ventura. What happened?
So she testified that there was one moment that she was in the house where she was taping this, making the band, that at one moment that she heard Sean Combs say, "Where are my eggs?" And she's in the kitchen with Cassie, and that Sean Combs took a skillet and flung the skillet, and that Cassie was on the ground trying to cover up her face. So why is that important and why does it come in? Because it's corroborating the testimony that Cassie has been given for the last 4 days. The thing is that when it comes to violence between intimate partners, violence, sexual violence, as well as physical violence, you never know what's going on behind closed doors. And that's why it's so scary. So we got a little bit of an insight with this last witness testifying to say, look, I saw this. So it's not just the word of Cassie Ventura.
Wrapping up, we're making a turn now to week 2. Some high-profile witnesses next week, as well as Cassie Ventura's mom, I believe, is supposed to take the stand. But how, at this point in the trial, where do things stand? How do you feel it's going?
Well, as of now, you had your star witness testifying. With Cassie Ventura testifying, remember that she has, in terms of the indictment, that 2 of the charges specifically pertain to her, as well as the racketeering conspiracy charge. So in terms of where we stand now, I think at the very least that the prosecution was able to make out the transportation to engage in prostitution, because it's very clear whether she wanted to whether it was voluntarily that she engaged in these freak-offs. In the end, they were paying escorts and prostitutes.
In different cities.
Yes, and flying them in order to engage in these sexual acts. But again, this is only the beginning. People need to wait, and the jury's going to have to wait until other witnesses come in to testify, because I know a lot of people are criticizing, well, she wanted to stay in this relationship. You know, she could have left so many times. That's why an expert will come in and testify as to why women stay in these types of relationships and why the behavior that they engage in are common behavior of people that are under the control of their abuser.
See how it all plays out. Bernarda, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So next week, the case returns to court. Of course, we'll be there. Stay with Eyewitness News and ABC7NY all day of the trial. We have a real-time blog of the developments that are happening inside that courtroom, as well as the details are unfolding in the Sean Diddy Combs trial.